Interesting, Andy, that Inter has been one of the teams that people have looked at and said, well, they are amongst the front runners for the Champions League this season, but they struggled against Bayern. Were you surprised?
Yeah, I was a little, and it's funny. I guess it takes us back to where we always are with the Champions League, where we talk about teams knowing how to win and all that sort of stuff, because really, that's the feeling you might get from Inter, depending on your perspective over these two games. Look, Bayern were way better than I thought they would be. I think, particularly with their reduced means of the moment. I mean, obviously they've still got a good team they can put out, but defensively they're really stretched. There's no Jamal Musiala, who's absolutely irreplaceable, as we spoke about last week. So for them to create as much difficulty for Inter as they did really impressed me. And I guess there are reasons, like with a few of the favourites, there are maybe reasons not to believe in Inter after these two games, because I think they were a little bit fortunate. I think you can look at right up until the end that they weren't sure. You think of that little spill from Jan Sommer, who was excellent actually over the two legs, although not as excellent as he perhaps might have needed to be had Bayern's finishing being a little bit sharper in that first leg in particular. That could have taken it into extra time. You had the Kingsley Coman shot that went over the top that could have taken it into extra time as well, with the very last kick of the game. So Inter were never comfy. And you think of them and you think of their defensive poise. I mean, they've conceded more goals in the two games against Bayern. And I realise that the nature of a cup competition is it's meant to get more difficult as it goes on. But they've still conceded more goals in the two games against Bayern than they conceded in 10 previous games in the Champions League. So, yeah, I have a funny relationship with this Inter team in terms of the Champions League at the moment. Like, they definitely could win it. And if there was a bit to convince me, I think it's the fact that this week, just like in the first leg in Munich, they managed to seize their moments. And that's something really we've said about Real Madrid time and time again, isn't it? In recent years in the Champions League. I don't think we've seen that many times in the Champions League and in the last decade when Real Madrid have dominated, where they've completely run over teams in games, where they've had control of it the whole way. You know, that's not necessarily what a cup competition is about. But maybe that's something we more associate with Inter, because, you know, they don't concede goals. They don't really concede good chances a lot of the time, as we said last week. And Bayern had more than enough to win this tie. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But if you're going to believe in Inter, I think the way that they reacted to going a goal down to Harry Kane at San Siro, you know, they were saying, we are not going to be turfed out of this competition. And they turned it up like for 10 minutes, really, just at the moment where they really needed to. And you look at the way those chances were taken. You look at the way Lautaro took his chance. I don't think Bayern could have done anything differently. It was barely a sniff of goal and he snaffled it straight away. It comes back off Kimmich and he just takes it like that. And, you know, he's in great form in the Champions League at the moment, obviously. And then you think of the high quality of their goals in the first leg, where, again, Bayern didn't really do too much wrong, despite the fact that they do have those defensive weaknesses at the moment. I guess those are the reasons why you believe in Inter, rather than that they were overwhelmingly great in one or both of the games.
Yeah, they cranked it up to 11. I think that was a sweet way of putting it. After the Harry Kane goal, JJ, can they crank it up to 11 against Barcelona is the question.
I mean, I definitely think that they're capable of doing so. Obviously, it'll be a completely different game up against Barca than it was against Bayern. But I think the beauty of these quarterfinals is that it's shown that everybody who would now be a favourite for the title is not totally infallible. They have, you know, their vulnerabilities, they have their weaknesses. You know, many people were really stunned by the way, and I'm sure we'll get to it later, you know, that Villa really sunk their teeth into PSG, certainly in the second half at Villa Park, and people hadn't really seen PSG sort of, you know, roughed up like that. certainly not in the last couple of months since their turnaround in form. So I do think, looking at, the strengths and weaknesses of all of the semi-finalists now, there's not really an absolute overwhelming favourite for me. And I think that plays into the hands of a team like Inter, because I think that Inter over 2 legs against Barca are capable of being pragmatic enough to, keep things, fairly narrow and potentially edge them out. I would probably say that Barca are slight favourites for me personally, but I wouldn't rule Inter out at all. And I do think that having that pragmatism that somebody like Simone Inzaghi has tactically, and having the quality obviously that Inter have on the pitch as well, if they can sort of get back to that previous defensive solidity, then I feel that Inter are still a good shout to, if not go all the way, then to at least make it to the final.